features. Let's just go ahead and start talking about some improvements and some new features within Symantec Endpoint Protection 12.1.2. So the biggest thing that we have is the focus on virtualization and virtualization improvements. Symantec and VMware have a great partnership together and are working hand in hand with integration between vShield and how to deal with virtualization. So a couple of bullet points here within new features for SEP 12.1.2. VMware vShield enabled shared Insight cache. So this allows you to use the shared Insight cache. We install that as a separate virtual machine on each host and provides the availability for load balancing the guest virtual machines to roam to the local shared Insight cache. James is going to talk a little bit more about this in depth in the demo. The SEPM, the SEP manager, can now be configured to remove those non-persistent guest virtual machines, and then we can also tag those non-persistent virtual machines. So again, a big focus on what's going on within VMware vShield and how to reduce the cost of running an endpoint protection product on your virtual environment. All right, group update provider improvements. So thanks for dealing with that little technical difficulty. We have the ability to specify explicit group update provider options. This allows clients to connect to a group update provider on a different subnet. This solves a long-standing issue and problem with the group update functionality, and James will talk a little bit more in depth on this as he does the demo. This also allows the administrators to configure a single live update settings policy for the entire organization. Client deployment improvements. There's a new client deployment wizard. This includes some configuration or communication update package deployments. This explicitly pushes the silent.xml to the clients. In previous versions of Symantec Endpoint Protection, this was done with a separate tool. A couple of other improvements that we talk about. We do have the ability to deploy and manage Windows 8 and some improvements as well along the latest version of Mac OS X. The client deployment wizard will search your network in a much improved area, reduce the bandwidth that it uses, and allows you to find new clients to deploy easier. The competitive removal tool, for those of you that might be using Trend or McAfee or Sophos, a competitive product of Symantec Endpoint Protection, the removal tool has much improvement on that to help ease the migration from one product to the other. And there's also this new tool called the Symantec Help tool, which will allow us to diagnose some common issues both before and or after installation of the SEP product. I mentioned Windows 8 and also Mac OS X improvements. We also have some other improvements. The formerly known as Metro interface is now fully supported. This proactive threat protection has been improved as well, where device control will now send that notification and log an event every time it blocks a disabled device. This was previously not configured in previous versions of Symantec Endpoint Protection. We can now lock down a device and add in a blacklist mode for those. So when I move my device into the system lockdown state, we can also run it as a blacklist mode. Exceptions can be made for HTTPS sites in the trusted web domain exceptions. We can also add variable exceptions to 64-bit as well as 32-bit applications. Some policy changes has been made. Full domain policies, locations, and settings can be exported and imported into new domain. This allows us to migrate from one domain to another or copy from one domain to another. A lot of minor improvements have been made, but the primary focus has been on the virtualization features and the integration with vSphere. Alrighty, I'm going to turn it over to James. James Lanning is one of our senior Symantec Endpoint Protection consultant. James will do a demo covering some of the things I talked about. So James, thanks for being here, and let's go ahead and rock and roll.
My name is James Lanning, and it's good to be with you guys today. We're going to basically go over some of the things that we've been talking about Just want to demonstrate the virtualization piece, the group update provider configuration piece, and then show you how you can push the Sylink XML file out to clients, helping out a lot with the migration process. But first, let's log into our test lab console here. This is the Release Update 2 console. This came out about a month ago, and we are very excited about the improvements that have been made around especially group update providers and integrating with vShield. And the vShield piece, that's only going to be improving as new versions come out. Or if ever there was a time to upgrade to Release Update 2 or 12.1 as a whole, now's the time. So first thing we're going to take a look at is how our shared Insight cache integrates with vShield. What we're doing is installing what's called the security virtual appliance, and it's difficult to demonstrate that in a VM lab like this without setting up a whole ESX host, but on your host you'll install this security virtual appliance. It's based on CentOS. It runs the shared Insight cache, and you put one on every host that you have, and then configure here in your virus and spyware protection policy. Policy is going to say, instead of a shared Insight cache that's hard-coded, you'll simply enable the VMware vShield shared Insight cache, and now as your clients load balance from host to host, they'll search and find the shared Insight cache on the security virtual appliance that's installed on that host. And before, we had to configure the hard-coded shared Insight cache. And just as a quick review, shared Insight cache is the functionality that stores a collection of known files. As the scan happens, the cache is populated with known good files, and the next time the scan happens, or any other client that scans checks against that cache, and if the file is still the same and hasn't changed, it will be skipped instead of scanned. Reduces the amount of time that scans need to take. Just want to show you down here is where I've actually installed a shared Insight cache. If you want to use the VMware vShield, that's great. If you want to use the traditional shared Insight cache that's installed on the guest OS, that's great too. We just highly recommend using the shared Insight cache to reduce that resource usage on VM clusters. Moving over to our live update settings policy, perhaps the update in Release Update 2 that we are the most excited about is group update providers. Now previously, we would have to set up one group update provider for every single subnet. And let's say you had, at a particular remote facility, your workstations on one subnet, your servers on a different one, maybe you had a wireless subnet, and then perhaps there's a VPN as well. You'd have to set up a group update provider on each one of those. But now we have this explicit group update provider. And moving into here, we're able to put in a subnet address and then assign a group update provider address here. So you could set all 4 or 5 subnets in a particular remote facility to talk to the group update provider in that facility. As clients join that subnet, let's say somebody leaves the Philly office with their laptop, flies across the country and plugs into the remote office in Los Angeles, they're going to join the subnet in Los Angeles and intelligently find the group update provider in that facility. So theoretically, well, I suppose I should say in theory and in practice, you are able to assign or configure one group update provider, or sorry, one live update settings policy for your entire organization. Whereas before, traditionally we were setting up one settings policy per remote site. If you had 100 remote sites, you'd end up with 100 live update settings policies, which got cumbersome. And now we can have all 100 of those facilities configured with one policy. One more program functionality piece that I wanted to demonstrate was the ability to push the Silink.xml file to clients through this console. The Silink.xml file is the communications sort of brain that the client uses to connect to the management server. It contains the address, the address, and it contains the certificate for communicating, and it determines where the client goes to connect to a manager. Before, we had to export an entire installation package, extract the Silink.xml file, and then use some kind of third-party tool to drop that onto a client that didn't have the right communications information. Now, we're able to, through this remote push feature, deploy the communication package. And the way this is going to work is, it's very similar to how Client Deployment Wizard works for pushing an installation package. But instead, all we're going to do is drop that Silink.xml file. So I'm actually going to show you exactly how this works. We have another VM that is running a Windows 7 sort of just a workstation. You can bounce right over to it. Here it is. And the client here is attached to a different site. It's not represented in the current database. We add that in. Local administrator or domain administrator. Type in our domain admin information. It will give you sort of a play-by-play here. Determine when it's been deployed. Looks like it's good. We're going to bounce back over to our workstation and force a policy update. Basically tell it to check in with the server and refresh here. And now we've brought that client into our current database. Just helps out a lot with migrations. If you're migrating to a new server, if you have machines that are using different versions of the product that you need to switch to a different database, just makes things easier. That's about all I had for new features in Release Update 2. If this is the first chance that you've had to look at the 12.1 console, there's a lot of improvements from 11.x to 12.1, and I'd be more than happy to address those concerns in questions or in phone calls. We're able to set up time to talk to you about the new version. Just let us know.
So James, I didn't tell you this or warn you this. So real quick, if I'm already on SEP 12.1, how do I move from 12.1 to 12.1.2? Is it simple as just running an install, or is there other things that I have to migrate with?
It's as simple as updating your license, downloading the binaries,
okay,
updating the management console here first. What that's going to do is drop new install packages. You'll see the 12.1.2 install packages, and at that point, it's up to your organization to decide what's our process for deploying updates. Do we use an endpoint management tool like Altiris? Do we use Active Directory scripts? You can do this through the console as well, and experienced SEP users are going to remember what's called the auto update. We add these packages into this folder, and as clients check in over here, they will determine whether or not they need that update. They will download it and apply it using the install settings and the install features that you configure.
So it's a pretty seamless migration from 12.1 to 12.1.2.
It really is. In 11, people had issues using the auto upgrade. The auto upgrade's been vastly improved in 12.1, and it has worked great for a lot of the facilities that I've worked with on migrations.
Okay, we got a couple of minutes before we wrap up today. James and I are kind of tag teaming, so thanks, James. There is a quick note, James, that according to the council, that our Win 7 is on 12.1.1 and not 12.1.2. So
Yes, that's true. I actually updated my client here on the SEP Manager. I updated it to 12.1.2 today. So yes, it is out of date. And what you're going to find, interestingly enough, now that Win 7 here has been migrated into the new console, it's going to pick up this install package, and it's going to start requesting a reboot. Well, it's scanning now. Once it's downloaded that update package on its own, it will pop up with a reboot window here, and then I will have my migration complete. I'll show you something. Show you what I do for a lot of the people that I work with on migrations. One of my favorite reports to run is the endpoint protection versions.
Okay. And
you see the spread of different versions in the system. And what you want to see out of this is you want to see 100% of your clients on the same version.
Sure.
Whether it's all on 11.0.6 or if it's all 12.1.2, we want to see we want to see a homogeneous environment.
So as you run this report, I got another question coming in. Is there in the upgrade, can I move from the embedded database to the SQL database, like move from the local embedded to a full Microsoft SQL database as part of the upgrade from 12.1 to 12.1.2, or is that something that should be built as more of a migration project? And I know you're not prepared for this, so kind of calling you out real quick, but
you absolutely can migrate to a SQL server, and that's highly recommended. If anyone on the webcast is using the embedded database, I would absolutely say build into the forecast of projects migrating to a SQL database. I would do that after upgrading to 12.1.2 or before,
okay,
but not during. I would say migrate to the new database and then upgrade your SEP environment, but do one before or one after and try to separate those two projects. But absolutely, I would recommend moving to the SQL database.
So it's not like during the install I would move. It would be a full project where I would say, okay, I need to plan this, I need to get this configured, I need to get this set up before I do that migration. All right, awesome. I got another question about this migration from the embedded database to the full SQL database. Like, real quick, and I know, James, that I'm beating you up real quick and you're not prepared, but can you give me like 2 or 3 quick bullet points on why I should be using the full SQL database versus the embedded database, besides it's more awesome?
The embedded database adds resource usage to the SEP manager, and your system's going to be functioning slower.
Okay.
That's a sort of a aesthetic reason. The embedded database it's an ad hoc thing. It's not a fully functional SQL database. It's SQL Express, I think is what they call it.
Okay.
It functions great if you've got a small facility, maybe like 100 or 200 endpoints. It's difficult to put the finger on it exactly, but we've just noticed anomalies working with embedded databases. And when you offload that onto a SQL database and let Microsoft SQL handle all those problems, the SEP manager is freed to be able to simply work on managing the environment instead of working with the database too.
Sure, plus there's other integration points, right? Like if I have IT analytics, for example.
Yes.
I can't leverage IT analytics for reporting with the embedded database. I have to have a full version of SQL. Do I need the full version of SQL to use like the integrated component for Altiris, or does that not matter? Do you know?
You definitely need to be on SQL to use IT analytics.
Okay.
To use things like the SEP integration component, you can still do that with an embedded database. Okay. But you're absolutely adding functionality when you move off that embedded database.
A couple more questions, if you don't mind, if you got something pressing. A couple of questions is, how does the Cylink deal with passwords on previous clients that are not known? And I don't know if that's something that you know, or if it's something we need to research.
So Cylink, if you don't know the password for a SEP client,
I
and you
think
need to
that's the
make
question.
changes,
Yeah.
that's difficult. I would say that work should be put into tracking down what that password is. You're going to have trouble.
So the follow-up comment is we don't know those passwords. So, I mean, to the answer to that question, is that something we probably have to look into if there's a knowledge base article within Symantec on how to deal with that, or if there's some other transition for dealing with those types of issues.
I would say that you can come into your wherever that client's being managed.
Sure.
We're in here, location independent settings. We can completely deactivate that password with a click.
Okay.
So my recommendation would be, if we don't know what the password is, either change it or disable it.
Okay.
And and then you can, if there is a password, I'm sure that everyone saw where you can add that password to the Cylink XML deployment piece, and work with it if there is a password on the client. But the password can be disabled here, and it can be changed. If it's an unmanaged client, then we're talking about a whole different situation.
Okay. So I got a couple of other questions. Last one really is do you have a walkthrough on how to migrate a SQL database? I'll take that. There's a couple of ways that you can do that. One, ITS, we're a services company. We could definitely help that with an engagement, right? How to plan, how to set that up, what's required. The second thing is there is on the Symantec knowledge base that allows you to walk through that migration. There's steps that you need to perform to get that migrated from the embedded to the SQL data. So to answer that question, how do I do this? Two ways. Obviously, as a services company from ITS, we'd love to help you out as an engagement to move and make sure that everything's taken care of there. Secondly, if it's something that you think you could handle, there is a knowledge base article. We'll include that in the answers to the questions that we send out on how to make that step. So in closing, James, anything you'd like to add real quick? And then we'll wrap this up.
What I'd like to say is that what we're looking at in terms of transitioning from 11.x to 12.1 is a product that looks the same, but it's entirely new product.
Sure.
It's been reworked, it's been rebuilt from the bottom, and we absolutely recommend moving to 12.1, migrating from 11x, and my main recommendation is put focus into ensuring that all the clients are on the same version, and that way, essentially what you're doing is just eliminating issues that might arise from previous versions of the product, introducing those problems that have been fixed in the new version. So that's about it from my end.
All right. One real quick question, 30 seconds. Can you walk through that? I think it was the client deployment portion that you covered.
Absolutely.
Can you point out where the Cylink deployment is again?
Absolutely. So we're in the Clients tab. On the this is always confusing, the Clients tab of the Clients tab, and we are in the Tasks area. We're adding a client. This brings up the Client Deployment Wizard, where we would either make a new package to install on an unmanaged computer. We might pick one, an install package, or the third option is the Communication Update Package Deployment.
Okay.
That's where it is. This is where we click through. We pick what group we want the client to go to. We will almost always pick computer mode. And then if there is a password required for stopping services, we add that in here. And on the next page, we're picking whether we want to push it out or simply save it. And you can run this executable manually on machines if you'd like to, or deploy that through your endpoint management, whatever you'd like to do. But in here we're able to deploy it.
Awesome. So thanks, guys. A little different from our standard webcast where we got some Q&A time. Got a couple of other questions that are in there that we'll kind of address a little bit more. I want to thank you all for attending. James?
1 second.
1 second. All right, awesome.
I'm seeing another question. I really just want to hit this question real quick. If you don't see this option in Client Deployment Wizard, it means that you're not on Release Update 2. This is a brand new feature that came out last month. So how would we rectify this? I would say all you'd have to do is upgrade to Release Update 2.
And as we talked previously, that's going to be deploying the update, getting the software, the license from Symantec, running the executable on the SEP manager, deploying that out, and then be the upgrade. Right? It's not like a rip and replace type of migration.
Right.
Awesome. So James and I would love to take your emails. If you have any questions, jjesse@itsdelivers.com. And then James is jlanning@itsdelivers.com. We'd love to be able to help you out. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot us a note. As I mentioned, I think a couple of times, great question and answer. Thanks, James, for kind of being called on the carpet or seat of your pants, whatever you want to call it.
Not a problem.
And then thanks again for joining. Hope you guys have an awesome Thursday and a great rest of the week. Thanks.